Anthony, what's up, man? Welcome back to the SABM podcast. It's been a few years.
Yeah, Scott, I appreciate you having me on here. Gosh, yeah, I'm trying to think back. It was definitely when I was in Japan, so probably 2019, 2020 time when we last had me on here. Very different time in my life and my career as well. Before I had
Yeah.
kids, before I got out. So I appreciate you having me back here.
Yeah. April 2020. So was that we did a podcast together, and I think you were doing real estate deals from your submarine or what? I don't, I don't,
Yeah.
yeah, and a lot has happened, right? You've got a family now and lots of exciting things going on here. Gosh, 5 years later. So excited to
Cheers.
to dive in today.
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, let's see, April 2020. So that was a month after I did my my very first large deal. Um, Man, and we just kind of shot off from there. But yeah, different partnerships that I've had since then, different deals that we've done, things gone well, things not gone well. So, man, that was just 5 years ago, completely different life I was leading. But yeah, I'm happy to chat more about, where what I've done, what I've, gotten into. Obviously, I'm looking a lot different even with the beard since I've from 5 years ago when I was still active duty. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, maybe just to kick
yeah.
off. So, you know, a good place to start. So we reconnected here recently within the last month or two, and it's great to have you a part of the 10X Vets group and look forward to seeing you in Tampa in January. And you've got a new company now, right? So now you've got a new company called Veteran Vectors. And maybe
Mhm.
just to kick off, man, like what led to starting that and what do you guys do?
Yeah. Yeah, so veteran vectors, essentially we help defense contractors and government contractors use AI to work smarter and not harder. And what that means is kind of different for each individual client. That can be AI consulting to figure out how they can use, existing COTS AI tools to better, utilize how they build out their products or how they, utilize a service or, write out proposals, right? If they already have a lot of workflows already in place, figuring out what tools are better for them. Or it can be all the way up to actually building out what we call digital helpers or workflow automations to actually accomplish tasks for them, like data entry, reports, compliance, audits, things like that. And again, it's very specific to the individual client on what their needs are, right? How big the company is, what their actual focus is, if they're a defense tech company, manufacturing company, if they are dealing with HR issues or accounting issues, back-end admin. But really, the goal with trying to work with defense tech companies or defense contractors in general is that if I can help them get a lot of this back end admin or compliance or manual processes out of the way for them, can help them really focus on what really matters, which is their mission and providing a service or a product to the government and or DoD, which I guess is now the Department of War now, but same at this point.
Yeah. And how did you find yourself kind of interested in AI and wanting to start this business? I don't know if you still do real estate or if that's something you're actively doing as well. But what kind of like led to this new company that you've built?
Right. So I'll start in the real estate piece first because I was just thinking about how it's an interesting bookend between doing real estate and doing the AI side. So I started into real estate in like 2019 or so, really kind of got ramped up, and then we went to Japan. And so a lot of my interactions with brokers, lenders, partners was very different. And so I had to rely on a lot of partnerships back here in the United States that I probably wouldn't have otherwise if I wasn't, 12 or 13 hours time zone difference. Um, like I said, we bought a lot of good deals, sold a lot of good deals. Some things went well, some things did not go well. April of 2022, I had my first daughter. She's now 3.5. And basically everything real estate really got put on hold. I found myself when I also had a podcast. I also was doing a bunch of real estate. I also had a bunch of other side hustles. All of that got pretty much put on hold when our first daughter was born. Um, she was born 6 weeks early. We had a NICU stay. I pretty much had to take like 2 months of special lib from when I was still active duty, special lib from work. And so that kind of made me realize that, I was spending so much time focused on trying to do this side hustle and trying to do real estate investing and not really spending any time with my family.
Mm.
And so I kind of just took a huge step back from real estate at that point to focus on really what mattered for me at that point, which was my family and trying to transition out of the Navy, which was about a year and a half after that. Um, and so it's interesting to me that I got into real estate a few months ago, right about the time that my second daughter was born, about beginning of the summer or so. And again, had she was born about 6 weeks early. We had a NICU stay, and I had to take kind of an extended leave off from my W-2, which I do defense contracting, and my day job, if you will. And it just kind of made me realize that like all the hoops I had to jump through for this W-2 and this defense contracting job were the same kind of hoops I had to jump in through for when I was still active duty, right? And I didn't necessarily want to have to do that, right? I didn't want to have a job where if I just dropped everything, nothing was going to get done, right? Or I have to go ask my boss for all this time off and potentially not get that accepted or lose a bunch of pay, right? And so, um, it made me really want to focus on my family again. And so I started the business basically at the same time that my second daughter was born to have this basically restart for the same reasons I want to get into real estate, right? To be able to have a second job or a source of income that I could have make my own, right? To have a business that I could make my own without having to be beholden on a W-2 job or a boss that, or, you know, contact me at all hours of the night, right? Or call me up to do duty or God forbid be in three-section duty again. Um, and so on the AI part of that, got interested in it because I started a mastermind right about that time, and started exploring, okay, like what is generative AI? What are actual automations? Like what is ChatGPT? Like what does that actually do? Like what is the back end components involved with that? And so, between the evolution of AI really in 2025 and the tools that are available that we can use, whether that's, ChatGPT, Anthropic's Claude, Google Gemini, all these different LLMs and I guess everyday names in AI. And then with my defense background, I kind of saw a gap in defense contractors and government contractors and how they're utilizing AI in their day to day in their own businesses. Um, you can't really swing a dead cat around DC without hitting a defense tech company that is using AI for the government themselves, right? Building a product for the government, the DoD that has AI somehow integrated into their product, right? But you never really hear a lot about companies that are using AI in their own companies or their own businesses to, streamline their manual processes for HR, back-end admin, or any of these things, particularly if they're a small or medium-sized business. And so, a lot of these companies that are talking about, big AI solutions that are doing all these streamlining and stuff are large companies like, Lockheed or Raytheon, excuse me, like an RTX, right? Those are the kind of companies that can afford enterprise level AI solutions. And so they're continuing to get ahead on the tech side and kind of leaving small and medium sized businesses behind to kind of pick up the pieces and try to figure it out. And that's really what's great about small, medium sized businesses. They figure it out in the end, right? They go after and, charge through and do the manual processes that need to get done to get their product in front of the right people. And that's amazing. And so my goal ultimately or I guess my mission with Veteran Vectors is to make the American defense industrial base the golden standard again. And I think that we've really gotten away from that with consolidating into prime contractors and getting away from small and medium-sized businesses. So anything that I can do to help get medium and small businesses to be able to compete at the same level as a Lockheed or Raytheon, Boeing for the same kind of contracts and innovate and make the defense industrial base a competitive, economically viable base again and global standard is a plus in my book. So long-winded answer to that's how I got into AI. That's where I'm, kind of the vision is, and that's where I hope to build out in the future.
Yeah, provide us some examples. I'd love to hear some examples maybe that are relevant to both maybe GovCon companies and just, everyday small businesses, on the processes. Like kind of just walk us through like an example or two of like, hey, like this was the challenge, this was the way they used to do business. This is the new way that they're doing business or managing their team or HR. leveraging AI. Like, walk us through one or two of those examples. I'd love to just kind of hear what they are and hear maybe how how we could save some time and money
Sure,
with
sure,
those
sure.
strategies.
Sure. So how I typically approach these conversations with a potential client is we talk through, okay, what are the different departments that you have, right? Is that sales, marketing, HR, you an actual admin person that's doing a lot of this, right? What are the actual components and departments that you have? And then from there, we look at, okay, what are your actual processes involved with that? So for example, I was working with a client that they're, I would call them a medium-sized defense tech company. They've been around for 30, 35 plus years, and they have a lot of people that have been there for that long, right? And so their systems are very ingrained in how they do things. And so one of the best examples I think of a system that works for them that they didn't necessarily want to change until you start talking about how much money it takes is on the HR side for them. They are a small enough company that it doesn't make sense for them to buy, or it's not cost effective for them to buy like a cost point that basically does a bunch of the payroll, that does leave, that does all the things that a large company like 1,000, a 2,000 person company, it makes sense to buy that level of software. So for them, they basically have five different pieces of software between like QuickBooks, like Paycor and other basic softwares that are all feeding into a Google Sheets or an Excel sheet on someone's computer, and they have a full-time person that is data crunching that and then spitting out payroll every 2 weeks. And that's their
Oh
full-time
gosh.
job. And I was like, you guys are making X amount of revenue, like multi-millions of dollars of revenue a year, and you have someone that their full-time job is to data crunch payroll, every 2 weeks. And that like blows my mind because that's something that it could easily be automated, right? And so when I look at things that can be automated, I kind of look at it from what I call a rapid framework. And it stands for an acronym. So anything that is repetitive in nature, right? Something that is, a certain frequency could be daily, weekly, yearly, whatever that looks like. Anything that requires a high level of accuracy. So if that, if a mistake is costly or can have kind of downstream repercussions for that workflow. Anything that is process driven already has an SOP involved with it. Anything that is input heavy, like I mentioned, that it has five different inputs into one Excel sheet, or anything that's already digitized, right? Which for most people they kind of operate off of the computer for most businesses anyway. So that's kind of a good way to start if you're looking at tasks that are already manual processes that could be automated to look at. So let's see, what's another example? Another good one is if you're doing lead sourcing or lead generation, right? I'm actually building out a job search automation for a former Department of State FSO who took the DRP and is now out. And so, she was spending 40, 50 hours, 60 hours a week searching for jobs, right? And a lot of that is very manual. When you have to go to a job site, you have to talk to recruiters, you have to, go to job fairs, depending on how much time and energy you want to spend, it can also be really expensive too, right? A lot of these sites, especially like Indeed, Monster, they have a lot of paywalls or premium features to get your resume, in front of a whole bunch of people, right? And
Hmm.
so, you can spend hundreds of thousands of dollars or hundreds of dollars or, a couple of thousand of dollars, depending on how long your search goes for, how many sites you're using. And obviously the amount of time you're spending is a lot of time. And so I'm building out an automation for her that basically says, hey, this is your set of criteria, whether it's a chief of staff in defense, right? Or chief of staff in government affairs, right? This is the location you want to look for. And it shoots it out to a number of sites. Let's call it like five different sites. And it gives you a list of results, right? So no more having to manually go to each one of these sites, plug in the results, plug in the location, and then look at there and look at the results. It's all in one Google Sheet for you. You can track, hey, I applied on this date. You can see, hey, I had an interview on this date. I didn't get an interview back. I didn't hear back for them, right? So that's another example of how you can kind of build that out into the job search format. That's kind of like lead generation in a way. And I would say a last good example is on the audit or is on the compliance side. So defense tech, trying to get compliant, like CMMC compliant, it gets really expensive really quick. Level 3, level 2, level 1, that's obviously, a lot. more that's involved as you go up. Um, the audit process for that can cost, $150,000 on a semi-annual basis, depending on, what's involved with how much data you're touching and, what sort of data you're looking at classification wise. Um, and it's not just the time, it's not just the money aspect of it. It's also how much time you're spending actually doing the audits, creating SOPs, having senior managers actually looking at all these SOPs. And it's a huge bear to kind of take on, right? And they're 3-year audits, right? So, you have time to prepare, but so much of that is manual, right? So much of that is, okay, I need to go look at this process or this policy, and I need to make sure it fits into this kind of wicket, right? Into this framework, right? Um, and there's like 350 bullet points on a CMMC level 2 audit, which is crazy, right? So not only do you have to do this audit and be compliant, but you also now have to do the rest of your work. And so there's an instance there where you can have most of that automated and basically say, hey, senior manager, I need you to check this, check this, check this, and save you probably potentially hundreds of hours manually pulling all these documents, manually making sure that all the frameworks are correct. And all you have to do is actually have a human input where it actually matters and where it makes sense to have a human input. So does that make sense what all those
Yeah.
examples are?
Yeah, just lots of examples of how to be more efficient, right? Because our time is our most valuable resource, and like if we can, yeah, just
Mhm.
work smarter, not harder, and that was I think that was pretty cool where you threw in the the job search example because there's a lot of folks listening that are looking for the might be looking for their next opportunity, right? And so how do you leverage AI to connect with the right people, to connect with the right companies, and much more efficiently. So,
Exactly.
what would you say are some of your biggest goals right now? Like, so as you look out over the horizon, this year is coming to a close, but maybe to finish the year, what's your biggest goal right now? And then looking out over, the next 3 to 5 years, where do you see this company going?
Yeah, it's a good question. In terms of the company, I had to think a lot of it about what I had to tie it back into my family as well. So we chatted about this a bit before the conversation or before the podcast started. But so I've been out a couple years, but I'm still a military spouse, and so my wife's active duty, still going through a doctorate nurse practitioner program, and so we're still moving around, we're still living the nomadic life. And so that brings with it a certain level of uncertainty when that other job, um, I guess, career havers normally wouldn't have, right? So I currently work as a defense contractor in my full-time W-2 job, and that job is out of DC, but we're now working at fully remote. And so the job prospects and the upward mobility are all based in DC, and I'm not going to go back there at least for the next 4 years based off of our next duty station. And so if we keep trying to move around, it's going to be really hard to stick in one sort of job. But this opportunity gives me the ability to work remotely, work with people I want to work with, work wherever I want, right? Work in any time zone, even. So we can basically pick up and go wherever, and work wherever, and work whoever I want in my own hours, which is freeing in a lot of ways, especially as a military spouse, where I know we're going to Chicago next for the next 3 years, but we could go back to Japan the next two or after that, or we could go to Europe, and having to basically quit a job and try to find a new job, I think is a common dilemma for a lot of military spouses. And so having a job that allows me to have that flexibility is probably the most important thing for me. Um, I would say in terms of goals for the rest of this year, I'm very much in the mindset of helping military or military vets, service academy grads in general. So the focus of the company really is on defense contractors and government contractors. That's my background both on the AI side and my 9 years as a submarine officer. But we're very much industry agnostic in terms of who I've helped so far. So it's been service academy grads who are in real estate investing, service academy grads or friends who are in financial services industry. And so, I'm willing to help and talk with people who are in those industries to kind of figure out a lot of their business processes that we can help with. particularly through the end of the year, as you start to get into the 2026 business goals and quarterly build outs and what that looks like for a lot of companies. Um, in terms of the next 3 to 5 years, I want to build this business out to be able to have, I would say about 10 to 15 good, solid, recurring clients that, I work with on a regular basis to help streamline, build out, products for them, and just kind of work with them on a regular basis, and then not have to do the W-2 anymore. That's ultimately the goal, is to completely have this be my full-time job and work with companies to, help streamline and work with them to build out automations in their companies. Um, and then, yeah, I think that's really the biggest thing. If we want to get philosophical on a level, in terms of like the defense industrial base, I think we're in a very sweet spot in terms of, not to get political, but I think the current administration is um, very advantageous to defense, to national security, and those sort of companies right now. So now's the time to really shine if you're a defense tech company or a defense-based company in general, and be able to be competitive on a level that can make you competitive for contracts, RFPs, RFIs, SIBRs, at a level that you can be competitive for the next 3 to 5 years, right? And I think that that's going to really go far if you can set yourself up now to shine for the next 3 to 5 years, because I think a lot of people are going to get run down with the shutdown, for example, right? It's really going to shake out a lot of people who, were running thin on profits, right? Or running thin on revenue and didn't have a lot of these efficiencies. And you're going to start to see, okay, we really did need this, this system built out for us. And we never knew we needed it until now, right? When we couldn't have this person to do this manual task, right? And everything kind of shut down, right? But think about it from this standpoint, having an AI do these tasks for you, it never has to sleep, it never has to stop. You have a human input wherever you want it. And it, you go on vacation, it still runs for you, right? You have clients that come to you that need to do onboarding, and you have it all automated. It doesn't have to take days. It can take literally minutes, right? You get off a call with a potential client, they say yes, you click them into your funnel, and then 5 minutes later they have everything set up in terms of onboarding process, right? It should really be as simple as that. So whether you need to be engaged, whether you're involved with a shutdown, whether all your people have to go home for one reason or another, AI never has to sleep and never really has to go home. So that's kind of the sweet spot with using AI automations.
Yeah, man, and it sounds like a great opportunity and with lots of runway and yeah, great new business that you've started. I would like to circle back to something you said at the beginning of the podcast,
Sure.
which I think is important. And you mentioned the 6 month break, right? Like, hey, whatever you were doing, like, kind of, you realized maybe it wasn't working or you were working too many hours. And I remember taking a 6 month, maybe a year break before I started this podcast, like 8 years ago. Um, and what I was doing at the time, it just wasn't working, right? And like the amount of years or whatever that I flashed forward like during that break, like just freeing up my own energy to just really kind of maybe take a step back, plan the next move, really accelerated me forward even faster. Right. So I don't know. I just wanted to underscore that point that you made, or that experience that you had, because it sounds like maybe something similar happened where for you, I think it was, spending more time with your family, but it also freed up your energy from a business career perspective where maybe, kind of came up with the next idea, somewhere, along the way. So I thought that was pretty interesting because I kind of went through a similar thing a while back.
Yeah, it's at the time it was frustrating to me because, in 2019 when I got into real estate, I was like, okay, I know I'm gonna get out in 4 or 5 years, right? And I know I have to go to Japan, we got to do all these things, but I know I'm gonna get out in this amount of time. And so I had this like set in my mind that I was gonna do all this real estate, I was gonna be a super big real estate mogul, and I was gonna have all this stuff going, and then I was never gonna have to have another W-2 again. And it didn't really pan out like that at all. And so, I tried all these different things, and then we had, my first daughter, and my time was basically zilch to be able to do any sort of side hustle. And, it was frustrating, but it was also freeing in a lot of ways to just be like, okay, I don't have to constantly, hustle, if you will, right? I don't have to constantly, stay up in the middle of the night to talk with people on the East Coast, right? I don't have to constantly do these things and be like, okay, not this isn't working. Why isn't this working? Why is no one, getting on calls with me? Why don't I have deals coming, right? And like constantly, like, why aren't things happening now? And just taking a step back and breathing and focusing on other things like my family and just letting things naturally happen. And I think it really did a lot of good for me, my relationship with my wife, obviously my relationship with my daughter, my mental health in a lot of ways. Um, and I like to think about, my family and how I balance out my life, kind of like balls. And like, you know, business ball or health, whether it's your W-2, whether that's, your religion, all these balls that are really not family are kind of like rubber balls, right? You're always trying to balance these balls and keep them all going all at once. And you can kind of make the same, I guess, synonymous analogy, if you will, with spinning plates, right? But you have all these different balls you're trying to bounce, right? And you can't keep bouncing them all at once, right? You got to focus on one thing at a time. But the only ball that could break if you drop it is the family ball, right? Because those kind of have long-term repercussions if you drop it or you neglect it for a longer period of time. But you set the business aside for 6 months, a year, and you come back to it, likelihood is you can pick it back up, right? Same thing with health, same thing with mental health or faith in a lot of ways, right? They're all rubber balls that you can pick back up and start bouncing again. But for me, family was not like that, right? And I think if you let it go long enough, you start to see the cracks that can turn into, discuss, it can turn into divorce, can turn into whatever else that looks like years down the line for a lot of people. So I try to I think about that when I'm trying to get into this and trying to focus on both family and business at the same time.
All right. Well, that was a good story to end on, Anthony, and it's great to have you back on the podcast 5 years
Absolutely.
later. We'll have to bookmark a date 5 years from now
There
for
we
another
go.
one, and we'll we'll see where you're at then. But in the meantime, I'm sure I'll be seeing a lot more of you, in the 10X Vets group and at the events and such. What's the best way for folks to reach out and get in touch with you, learn more about your company and what you do?
Sure. So there's a couple ways they can reach out or learn more. We have a website, veteranvectors.io, and you can book a call with me on there. You can see, what kind of services we offer, examples of automations on there. The better way to reach out to me is on LinkedIn. You can book the same calls on there, but you can also see, what I'm doing, content I'm posting, and also the automations that, examples of automations that I post, every week, every other week, things like that. Also, if you're a business owner, particularly a Service Academy grad business owner, reach out. Happy to chat with you, particularly if you're a defense contractor, government contractor, having a lot of issues with, manual processes in general, or just want to chat about how, you can utilize AI into your company. Happy to chat with people about that too.
All right, Anthony. Well, sounds good, my friend. And we'll link to your website and your LinkedIn profile in the show notes so people can easily reach out and connect right after they listen to this. And here's to an awesome finish to 2025.
Awesome. You as well. Thanks so much for having me on, Scott.